The CEO's town car rolled to a stop at Gate 7. Alexandra Hale leaned forward, irritated. Some low-level guard was blocking the entrance with his arm raised. She'd fired people for less. But when her driver honked, the guard didn't move. Instead, he pressed his radio and scanned the undercarriage with a mirror. Then he looked up, and their eyes met through the tinted glass. His face was stone. Hers went pale, because sitting in the back seat, briefcase on her lap, was a woman who'd been dead for 3 years. The morning air was thick with the kind of rain that didn't fall so much as hover, a mist that clung to windshields and blurred the edges of the world. Finn Carter stood beneath the overhang of Gate 7 at Hale Dynamics Tower, coffee in one hand, clipboard in the other, watching the stream of luxury sedans and executive SUVs roll through the checkpoint. His uniform was pressed, his posture relaxed, but his eyes never stopped moving. Count the vehicles, note the passengers, check the badges. Repeat. It was a rhythm he'd learned in another life. In dusty villages where the difference between a farmer's truck and a bomber's van was a matter of seconds and intuition. Back then, he'd been Staff Sergeant Finn Carter, Explosive Ordnance Disposal, United States Army. Now he was just Finn, night shift security guard, single father, and the guy nobody really noticed unless something went wrong, which was fine by him. "Morning, Finn," the voice crackled through his earpiece. It was Derek manning the booth at Gate 4. "Quiet out there?" "Quiet," Finn replied, watching a white delivery van idle near the loading dock across the plaza. It had been sitting there for 4 minutes. Maybe 5. Longer than usual. "Good. Keep it boring." Finn didn't respond. Boring was a luxury he'd stopped believing in years ago. The van's engine rumbled low, exhaust puffing into the damp air. The driver wore a baseball cap pulled low, face angled away from the security cameras. Finn's hand drifted to his radio. "Derek, you got eyes on the white Sprinter near Dock 3? A pause. "Yeah. Says he's waiting on a signature from facilities." "How long's he been there?" "I don't know, man. Maybe 10 minutes? Finn's jaw tightened. 10 minutes was too long. Delivery drivers didn't wait. They dropped, they signed, they left. He keyed his radio again. "Run the plate." "Jesus, Finn, it's 7 in the morning. You want me to—" "Run it." The line went silent except for the soft clatter of keystrokes. Finn kept his eyes on the van. The driver shifted in his seat, checked his phone, then glanced toward the tower entrance. Not like someone waiting, like someone timing. "Plate comes back to a rental agency in Newark," Derek said, "booked under a corporate account. Hale Dynamics Logistics." "We don't have a logistics division." "What?" "We don't have a logistics division, Derek. Never have." Now there was real silence on the line. Finn's pulse didn't spike. It never did anymore. Instead, his mind shifted into the old mode, the one where time stretched and details sharpened. He set down his coffee, clipped the radio to his belt, and started walking toward the van, keeping his stride casual, his hands visible. 20 meters. 15. 10. The driver saw him coming. Their eyes met for half a second, and that was all Finn needed. The man's pupils dilated. His hand moved toward the ignition. Finn broke into a sprint. The van's engine roared. Tires screeched. Finn lunged for the passenger door, but the vehicle lurched forward, fishtailing across the wet pavement and disappearing around the corner of the building. Finn stopped, breathing hard, and keyed his radio. "Gate 4, we have a hostile vehicle fleeing southeast. Alert NYPD and lock down all entrances. Now." "Finn, what the hell? Do it!" He turned and ran back toward the tower entrance, his boots pounding the asphalt. His mind was already 3 steps ahead, running scenarios, calculating probabilities. A fake logistics van, a driver who bolted the second he was approached, and 10 minutes of unobserved access near the loading dock, where deliveries came in, where security was thinner, where the service elevator connected directly to the executive floors. Finn hit the lobby doors at a sprint, startling the receptionist behind the marble desk. "Call building security," he shouted. "Evacuate floors 10 through 20. Do it now." "Sir, I can't just—" He didn't wait. He vaulted the turnstile and slammed his badge against the executive elevator panel. The doors slid open with agonizing slowness, and he jabbed the button for the 20th floor, the penthouse level, where Alexandra Hale's office overlooked the city like a glass fortress. As the elevator climbed, Finn's hands were steady, but his mind was racing. He thought of Sarah. He thought of Cobble, of the market square, of the boy with the vest who'd walked too slowly, looked too calm. He thought of the warnings he'd filed, the reports he'd written, the colonel who'd patted him on the shoulder and said, "Carter, you're seeing ghosts." 4 people died that day, including his wife Sarah, who'd been coordinating relief efforts 2 blocks away. He wasn't seeing ghosts, he was counting patterns. The elevator chimed. 20th floor. Finn stepped into the marble and glass corridor, past assistants and junior executives who barely looked up from their phones. At the far end, double doors stood open to Alexandra Hale's corner office, a sprawling space of floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, and a desk that probably cost more than Finn's annual salary. And there she was, Alexandra Hale. 34 years old, CEO of Hale Dynamics, one of the largest private defense contractors in the country. Brilliant, ruthless, and currently signing a document with a platinum pen while her assistant hovered nearby with a tablet. Finn didn't knock. He walked straight in. "Ma'am, you need to come with me, right now." Alexandra looked up, her expression shifting from surprise to annoyance in the span of a heartbeat. "Excuse me?" "Ma'am, there's a credible threat to this building. You need to evacuate immediately." Her assistant, a young woman named Claire, stepped forward.
"Who are you?" "Finn Carter, building security." "Ma'am, we don't have time to—" "Building security?" Alexandra's voice was ice. "You mean the guy who checks IDs at the gate?" "Yes, ma'am." "And you're telling me to leave my office because of a credible threat?" She set down her pen, folding her arms. "Based on what intelligence? FBI? Homeland Security?" "Based on a van that shouldn't have been here, a driver who ran when I approached, and 10 minutes of unsupervised access to your loading dock." Alexandra stared at him. "That's it? That's your credible threat?" Finn's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, I've seen this before. I know what it looks like when someone's timing an entry. If I'm wrong, you can fire me. But if I'm right and you stay here, I'm not evacuating my building because a security guard had a bad feeling." She turned back to her desk. "Claire, call downstairs and tell them to escort Mr. Carter out of—" The fire alarm screamed to life. All 3 of them froze. Then came the sound, a deep, rolling boom that seemed to rise from the guts of the building itself. The floor shuddered. The windows rattled. And somewhere below them, glass shattered like 1,000 breaking mirrors. Alexandra's face went white. Finn didn't hesitate. He crossed the office in 3 strides, grabbed her by the arm, and hauled her toward the reinforced panic room built into the wall behind her desk, a feature mandated by her father's security team after a kidnapping attempt years ago. "Claire, get in!" he barked. The assistant stumbled forward and Finn shoved both women into the narrow steel-lined space. He followed them in and slammed the door, spinning the manual lock just as another explosion rocked the building, closer this time, maybe 2 floors down. The lights flickered, smoke detectors wailed, and in the sudden, suffocating darkness of the panic room, Alexandra Hale finally spoke. "How did you know?" Finn leaned against the door, his shoulder braced against the steel, and closed his eyes. "Because I didn't listen last time. 2 years earlier. Kabul." The heat in Afghanistan was a living thing. It pressed down on you, made your thoughts slow and sticky, made you want to sit in the shade and do nothing. But Finn Carter wasn't built for doing nothing. He crouched in the dirt outside a compound in the Shahri-Naw district, his tools spread on a canvas tarp, his gloved hands steady as he examined the device they'd pulled from beneath a contractor's truck. It was crude. Pressure plate, cell phone trigger, 15 pounds of homemade explosive. But crude didn't mean safe. "How's it look, Sergeant?" asked Lieutenant Moss, standing 10 feet back with his rifle slung. "Stable for now," Finn replied. "But the wiring's sloppy. Could be a secondary trigger. Can you disarm it?" "Give me 5 minutes." Sarah's voice crackled in his earpiece. She was 2 blocks away, coordinating with an NGO at a school reopening. "Finn, you copy?" "I'm here," he said softly, pulling a wire free with needle-nose pliers. "Just checking. You've been quiet." "Kinda busy, babe." She laughed, a sound that always made the heat feel lighter. "I know, just be safe, okay?" "Always am." He wasn't.
3 hours later, after he'd flagged a second device near the market square and filed a report with his CO, the colonel had pulled him aside. "Carter, you're seeing threats where there aren't any. You filed 3 reports this week. 2 were false alarms. Sir, the pattern suggests you're burned out. Take a break. Go see your wife." Finn had wanted to argue. He'd wanted to show him the frequency data, the timing intervals, the way the devices were placed in a grid that suggested coordination, not randomness. But he was a sergeant, and the colonel was a colonel, and that was that. So he'd gone to see Sarah. She'd been in the school when the vest detonated. 4 dead, 11 injured. And Sarah, beautiful, brilliant Sarah, who'd believed the world could be better if you just tried hard enough, gone in an instant. The investigation later confirmed what Finn had suspected. The devices were part of a coordinated network. The bomber had been scouting for weeks. Finn's reports had been accurate. They just hadn't been believed. Present day. The panic room. Alexandra's voice cut through the memory like a knife. "Carter. Carter, are you listening?" Finn opened his eyes. The emergency lighting in the panic room cast everything in a sickly red glow. Claire was hyperventilating in the corner, and Alexandra was staring at him with a mixture of fear and fury. "How long do we have to stay in here?" she demanded. "Until the structure's stable and the sweep team clears the building." "And how long is that?" "Could be an hour, could be 6. 6 hours?" Her voice rose. "I have a board meeting in 2 hours. I have investors flying in from it." "Ma'am?" Finn's voice was flat, emotionless. "There are at least 2 explosions in this building. We don't know if there are more. We don't know if the structure's compromised. And we don't know if whoever set this is still inside. So you're going to sit here, in this room, until I say it's safe. Understood?" For a long moment, Alexandra just stared at him. Then slowly, she sank onto the bench along the wall. "You said you didn't listen last time," she said quietly. "What did you mean?" Finn didn't answer right away. He pressed his ear to the door, listening for footsteps, for voices, for the sound of secondary collapses. When he was satisfied, he sat down opposite her. "I was Army EOD," he said. "Explosive Ordnance Disposal. I spent 6 years in Iraq and Afghanistan defusing bombs. I got good at spotting patterns, timing, placement, behavior, and one day I saw a pattern that didn't make sense, so I filed a report. My CO told me I was paranoid. And 4 people died, including my wife." The silence that followed was heavier than the smoke seeping under the door. Claire finally looked up, her face streaked with tears. "You really think someone's trying to kill us?" "I think someone's trying to send a message," Finn said, "and Ms. Hale was the target." Alexandra's hands clenched into fists. "Who?" "I don't know yet, but when we get out of here, we're going to find out." 30 minutes earlier. The loading dock. The man in the baseball cap moved quickly through the service corridor, his tool bag slung over one shoulder, his cloned security badge swinging from a lanyard. He'd studied the building's layout for weeks, memorized shift changes, camera blind spots, maintenance schedules. Getting in had been easy. The real challenge was placement. He descended to sublevel 2, where the HVAC systems hummed behind chain-link cages. He knelt beside a junction box, opened his bag, and pulled out 2 devices, each the size of a lunchbox, wrapped in duct tape and wired to cell phone triggers. The first one went behind the air intake for floors 15 through 20. The second went near the structural support column for the east wing. He didn't arm them yet. Not until he was clear. He checked his watch. 7:42 a.m. Alexandra Hale would be in her office by now, signing contracts, making deals, pretending she gave a damn about the people she'd destroyed to get there. He thought of his daughter, thought of the medical bills, the foreclosure notice, the severance package that barely covered a month's rent, thought of the email he'd sent HR, polite, desperate, begging for his job back, and the automated reply that had come 6 hours later. "Your employment with Hale Dynamics has been terminated. This decision is final. Final." He armed the first device, then the second. Then he walked out of the building, climbed into his white van, and drove away. Awesome. The panic room. Present. Finn's radio crackled to life. "Security Team 1 to Carter. Do you copy?" He pressed the button. "Carter here. I'm in the executive panic room with Ms. Hale and her assistant. What's the situation? 2 confirmed explosions, sublevel 2 and floor 17. Fire suppression is active, but we've got structural damage on the east side. FDNY's on scene, buildings being evacuated. Any casualties? A pause. 3 injured, no fatalities so far. Finn closed his eyes and exhaled. Copy that. We're staying put until you give the all clear. Understood. Sit tight, Carter. You did good. He clipped the radio back to his belt and looked up to find Alexandra staring at him. Why? She asked. Why what? Why did you come up here? You could have run. You could have evacuated with everyone else. Why risk your life for someone you don't even know? Finn met her gaze, and for the first time she saw something raw behind his eyes. Something that looked like grief and guilt and a determination so fierce it was almost frightening. Because last time I didn't, he said simply. And I've been counting the cost ever since. 1 hour later. When the door finally opened, it wasn't a SWAT team or a bomb squad. It was a tall black woman in an FBI windbreaker, flanked by 2 agents with tactical gear and very serious expressions. Ms. Hale, I'm Special Agent Monica Reeves. Are you injured? Alexandra shook her head, stepping out of the panic room on shaky legs. Claire followed, and then Finn, who was immediately surrounded by 3 agents with their hands on their sidearms. Hands where we can see them, sir. Finn raised his hand slowly. I'm building security. Finn Carter. We know who you are, Mr. Carter. Agent Reeves stepped forward, her eyes cold. And we need to ask you some questions. Questions? Alexandra's voice was sharp. He saved my life. Maybe, Reeves said, or maybe he knew exactly when and where to be because he helped plan it. The words hung in the air like a grenade. Finn didn't move, didn't argue. He just looked at Alexandra and she saw the exhaustion in his face, the weight of a man who'd been carrying too much for too long. I didn't do this, he said quietly. Then you won't mind coming downtown, Reeves replied. And before Alexandra could say another word, they put Finn Carter in handcuffs and led him away. The interrogation room, FBI field office. The room was small, sterile, and smelled faintly of stale coffee. Finn sat in a metal chair, his hands cuffed to the table, while Agent Reeves paced in front of him like a lawyer preparing for closing arguments. Let's go over this again, she said. You spotted a suspicious van at 7:35 a.m. You approached the driver, who fled. You then entered the building without clearance, ran to the executive floor, and locked the CEO in a panic room 60 seconds before the first explosion. That's correct? And you expect me to believe that's a coincidence? I expect you to believe it's observation. Reeves stopped pacing. Observation. Yes, ma'am. I was trained to recognize patterns. The van was wrong, the timing was wrong, the driver's behavior was wrong, so I acted. Or you knew exactly what was about to happen because you were part of it. Finn's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. If I wanted to kill Alexandra Hale, I wouldn't have locked her in the safest room in the building. Maybe you didn't want to kill her. Maybe you wanted to be the hero. Make yourself indispensable. Get promoted. Hell, maybe you wanted her gratitude, her attention. I wanted to keep her alive, Finn said flatly. That's it. Reeves leaned forward, her palms flat on the table. Then explain to me how a low-level security guard with PTSD and a grudge against the Army just happened to save the CEO of one of the biggest defense contractors in the country. I don't have a grudge against the Army. No. You were discharged after your wife died. You filed complaints about your chain of command. You've been working night shifts at a job you're overqualified for. That doesn't sound like someone who's moved on. Finn looked her in the eye. I'm not the bomber, Agent Reeves, but I know who is. That got her attention. Talk. The devices were placed in 2 locations, sublevel 2 and floor 17. That's not random. Sublevel 2 controls HVAC for the upper floors. Floor 17 is directly below the executive offices. Whoever did this wanted to trap people on the top floors and cut off their air supply. That's not terrorism, that's targeted assassination. Reeves crossed her arms. And how do you know all this? Because I've seen this before. Kabul, 2023. A coordinated bombing that targeted a specific individual by isolating their location and creating panic. It's textbook. And who was the target in Kabul? Finn's voice went quiet. A relief coordinator named Sarah Carter, my wife. For the first time, Reeves hesitated. I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Carter, but that doesn't prove you're innocent. Then check the security footage, Finn said. Check my time logs, my badge swipes, my phone records. You'll see I was exactly where I said I was. And you'll see that the only reason Alexandra Hale is alive is because I was paying attention. Reeves studied him for a long moment. Then she stood, walked to the door, and paused. For what it's worth, she said, I hope you're telling the truth. So do I, ma'am, because if I'm right, whoever did this isn't finished. The door closed, and Finn was left alone in the silence, counting the seconds until the next explosion. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry insects, and Finn counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4, the way he always counted things when the walls started closing in. It was a trick Sarah had taught him during his first deployment, back when the nightmares were so bad he couldn't sleep more than 2 hours at a stretch. Count something, she'd said, her voice crackling through the satellite phone from their tiny apartment in Georgia. Count stars, count breaths, count anything. It gives your brain something to hold on to. He was holding onto the edge of the table now, his cuffed hands pressed flat against the cold metal, when the door opened again. But it wasn't Agent Reeves who walked in. It was a man in an expensive suit, charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, with silver hair and the kind of posture that came from decades of boardrooms and power lunches. Mr. Carter, the man said, extending his hand before realizing Finn couldn't shake it. He lowered it awkwardly. I'm Robert Hale, Alexandra's father. Finn straightened slightly. He'd seen Robert Hale on the news at shareholder meetings, standing beside senators and generals. The man who'd built Hale Dynamics from a small aerospace firm into a defense empire worth $12 billion. Sir, Finn said simply. Robert pulled out the chair across from him and sat down slowly, like a man whose knees didn't work as well as they used to. Agent Reeves tells me you believe my daughter was the target of a coordinated attack. Yes, sir, I do. And she tells me you have military experience, EOD. 6 years, sir. Iraq and Afghanistan. Robert nodded, his fingers steepled under his chin. Then you understand what it means to make a decision under pressure, to act when others hesitate. I do. Good. Robert reached into his jacket and pulled out a thin folder. He slid it across the table. Because I've been reviewing your personnel file, Mr. Carter, and I've found some interesting things. Finn didn't open the folder. He kept his eyes on Robert's face. You were decorated twice for valor, Robert continued. You saved 17 lives in Kandahar when you disarmed an IED that had been rigged to a school bus. You identified a bombing network in Kabul that intelligence had missed for months. And according to your commanding officer, before the incident with your wife, you had the best threat assessment record in your unit. That was a long time ago, sir. Was it? Robert's gaze was sharp, penetrating. Because this morning, you did something very few people could have done. You saw a pattern, you acted on it, and you saved my daughter's life. Finn's throat tightened. I was just doing my job. No, Robert said quietly. You were doing what you were trained to do, what you were built to do, and now Agent Reeves wants to lock you up because she can't understand how someone could be that good at their job. He leaned forward. But I understand, Mr. Carter. Because I've spent 40 years hiring people, and I know talent when I see it. So I'm going to ask you a question, and I need you to be honest with me. Yes, sir. Did you have anything to do with the attack on my building? Finn met his eyes without flinching. No, sir. I didn't. Robert held his gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded, stood up, and knocked twice on the door. Agent Reeves appeared almost instantly, her expression wary. Agent Reeves, Robert said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made even federal agents stand a little straighter. I'm posting bond for Mr. Carter. He'll remain under house arrest with an ankle monitor, and he'll cooperate fully with your investigation. But you will release him, now. Reeves's jaw tightened. Mr. Hale, with all due respect, Agent Reeves, my daughter is alive because of this man. And if you think I'm going to let the FBI railroad him while the real bomber is still out there, you're mistaken. He turned back to Finn. I'll have my lawyers here within the hour. Sit tight. And then he was gone, leaving Finn alone with Agent Reeves, who looked like she wanted to punch something. You're a lucky man, Carter, she said coldly. No, ma'am, Finn replied. Lucky would have been stopping it before anyone got hurt. 3 hours later, Finn walked out of the FBI field office into the gray afternoon light, an ankle monitor locked around his left leg, and a list of restrictions that included no contact with Alexandra Hale, no travel beyond a 5-mile radius of his apartment, and a daily check-in with his assigned agent. A black sedan was waiting at the curb, and when the back door opened, Alexandra herself stepped out. She looked different than she had in the panic room, cleaned up, composed, back in control. But her eyes were red-rimmed, and when she saw him, something in her expression cracked. You're an idiot, she said. Finn stopped on the sidewalk. Ma'am? You locked me in a room. You disobeyed a direct order. You could have been killed. Her voice was shaking. And now the FBI thinks you're a suspect, and my father had to bail you out like some common criminal, and... She stopped, pressing her fingers to her eyes. I'm sorry, Finn said quietly. I didn't mean to make things harder for you. Harder? Alexandra laughed, a short, bitter sound. You saved my life, Carter. You saw something no one else saw, and you acted, and because of that, I'm standing here instead of lying in a morgue. So don't apologize, just... She took a breath. Just tell me the truth. Do you really think someone's trying to kill me? Yes, ma'am. I do. Why? Because the bombs were placed too precisely. Because the timing was too deliberate. This wasn't about making a statement. It was about removing you from the board. Alexandra's hands clenched into fists. Then we need to find out who. That's the FBI's job, ma'am. But the FBI thinks you're involved, which means they're wasting time looking in the wrong direction. She stepped closer, her voice dropping. My father told me about your file, about Kabul, about your wife. Finn's jaw tightened. That's not relevant, isn't it? You lost someone because people didn't listen to you, and now you're trying to make sure it doesn't happen again. She held his gaze. I need someone I can trust, Carter. Someone who sees what others miss. And right now, that's you. Ma'am, I'm under house arrest. I can't... You can consult, advise. My father's already cleared it with the FBI. They don't like it, but they'll allow it. She pulled a phone from her pocket, a secure device, encrypted with a single contact programmed in. This is a direct line to me. If you see something, if you think of something, you call. Understood? Finn took the phone slowly. Why are you doing this? Because you were right, Alexandra said simply. And I was wrong, And I don't make the same mistake twice. She climbed back into the sedan, and Finn watched it pull away into traffic. Then he looked down at the phone in his hand, at the ankle monitor around his leg, and he thought about Sarah, about the market square, about the reports no one had read and the warnings no one had believed. He wasn't going to let that happen again. Finn's apartment was a third-floor walk-up in Queens, sandwiched between a bodega and a laundromat that smelled perpetually of fabric softener and fried plantains. The building had seen better days, cracked plaster, peeling paint, radiators that clanked like chains, but the rent was manageable, and it was close to Audrey's school. That was all that mattered. He climbed the stairs slowly, exhaustion settling into his bones like old shrapnel. The door to 3B was slightly ajar, and his heart kicked once before he remembered. Mrs. Chen from downstairs had a key. She watched Audrey when Finn worked nights. He pushed the door open. Dad! Audrey launched herself at him like a missile, all 73 pounds of 10-year-old energy and unbrushed hair. Finn caught her, staggered back a step, and held on tight. Hey, kiddo, he murmured into her hair. You okay? Mrs. Chen said there was an explosion at your work. She said people got hurt. Are you okay? Did you get hurt? You smell like smoke. I'm fine, Audrey. I promise. She pulled back, her dark eyes, Sarah's eyes, scanning his face for lies. Audrey Carter had inherited her mother's intelligence, her curiosity, and her absolute inability to accept vague answers. At 10, she was already taking pre-algebra, building circuit boards in her bedroom, and asking questions that made Finn feel like he was being cross-examined by a very small lawyer. "You're lying," she said flatly. "You do that thing with your jaw when you're lying." "I'm not lying, I'm just tired." "That's a deflection, not a denial." She crossed her arms. "What happened?" Finn sighed and glanced over her shoulder. Mrs. Chen stood in the kitchen doorway, wringing her hands, her face creased with worry. "Mr. Carter, the news, they said it was terrorism. They said—" "It wasn't terrorism, Mrs. Chen. It was targeted, and it's being handled." He gave her what he hoped was a reassuring smile. "Thank you for staying with Audrey. I've got it from here." Mrs. Chen hesitated, then nodded and gathered her purse. "You call if you need anything. Anything at all." When she was gone, Finn locked the door, checked the windows, old habits, and sank onto the couch. Audrey immediately climbed up next to him, tucking herself under his arm the way she used to when she was small enough to fit in the crook of his elbow. "Tell me what happened," she said quietly. So he did. Not everything, not the panic room, not the interrogation, not the part where he'd thought for a split second that he was going to die in that office. But enough. Enough for her to understand that he'd seen something wrong, acted on it, and kept people safe. When he finished, Audrey was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You did what Mom would have done." Finn's chest tightened. "What do you mean?" "She always said you had to trust your gut. That data was important, but intuition was what kept you alive." Audrey looked up at him. "You trusted your gut today, and you saved people. That's what she would have done." He kissed the top of her head. "Yeah, kiddo, it is." That night, after Audrey was asleep, Finn sat at the small desk in the corner of his bedroom and opened his laptop. The FBI had confiscated his work computer, but they hadn't touched his personal files, and Finn had been making backups of building security data for months, not because he was paranoid, because he was thorough. He pulled up the footage from Gate 7, scrubbing backward through the morning's arrivals. The white van appeared at 7:14 a.m., pulling into the loading dock with no visible plates on the front bumper. The driver kept his face turned away from the cameras. Deliberate, practiced. At 7:22, a figure in a maintenance uniform entered the building through the service entrance. Badge swipe, 072218. Finn froze the frame and zoomed in. The badge was clipped to the man's belt, partially obscured, but the ID number was visible, 4728B. He cross-referenced it against the employee database he'd downloaded last month during a routine audit. Employee 4728B, Marcus Teague, maintenance technician, hired 8 months ago. Finn pulled up Teague's personnel file. Clean background check. No criminal record. Previous employment at a private security firm in New Jersey. References checked out. But something was off. He ran a reverse image search on Teague's employee photo. Nothing. He searched for Marcus Teague in New Jersey court records, property records, social media. Nothing. Marcus Teague didn't exist. Finn's pulse quickened. He pulled up the badge swipe logs for the past 6 months and filtered for 4728B. Teague had swiped into the building 47 times. Always during off-peak hours, always through service entrances, always in areas with minimal camera coverage. He'd been planning this for months. Finn grabbed the encrypted phone Alexandra had given him and dialed. She answered on the second ring. "Carter?" "The bomber's not external, ma'am. He's internal. Maintenance staff. Badge number 4728B, Marcus Teague. Except Marcus Teague doesn't exist. It's a ghost identity." There was a pause. Then Alexandra's voice, sharp and focused. "How do you know this?" "Because I've been tracking badge swipes and access patterns for 6 months. Teague's movements don't match normal maintenance behavior. He's been scouting, learning the building, and this morning he walked in through the service entrance 22 minutes before the first explosion." "Hold on." He heard her typing, heard voices in the background. "I'm looping in Agent Reeves. Stay on the line." A moment later, Agent Reeves's voice cut in, clipped and skeptical. "Carter, if this is some attempt to deflect suspicion, it's not. Check your own footage. Service entrance, 7:22 a.m., badge 4728B. Then check your employee database. Marcus Teague was hired 8 months ago, but he has no digital footprint before that. No social media, no prior addresses, no credit history. He's a fabrication. There was a long silence. Then Reeves said, "We'll verify." "Don't go anywhere, Carter." "I'm wearing an ankle monitor, Agent Reeves. I couldn't go anywhere if I wanted to." The line went dead. Finn set the phone down and leaned back in his chair, staring at the frozen image of Marcus Teague on his screen. The man's face was partially turned away, but Finn could see enough. The set of his jaw, the tension in his shoulders, the way he moved with purpose, not panic. This was someone who'd been hurt, someone who'd lost something, someone who blamed Alexandra Hale. Finn understood that feeling better than he wanted to admit. By morning, the FBI had confirmed what Finn already knew. Marcus Teague was a false identity, created 8 months ago using stolen credentials and a fabricated work history. The real Marcus Teague had died in a car accident in 2019. The man who'd bombed Hale Dynamics had stolen his name, his social security number, and his face, or at least a close enough approximation that background checks hadn't flagged it. Agent Reeves called Finn at 6 a.m., her voice tight with frustration. "We're running facial recognition on every employee hired in the past year. We're also pulling financial records, looking for anyone with a grudge against Hale Dynamics." "You won't find him that way," Finn said, staring at his laptop screen. He hadn't slept. "He's not angry at the company. He's angry at her." "Explain." "The bombs were placed to isolate the executive floors, not to destroy the building, not to maximize casualties, just to trap Alexandra Hale and make sure she couldn't escape. This is personal." "Then who has a personal vendetta against a billionaire CEO? Someone she fired, someone she destroyed, someone who lost everything because of a decision she made." Finn pulled up another file, a list of terminations from the past 2 years. "I need access to Hale Dynamics HR records, severance packages, wrongful termination suits, anyone who was let go under contentious circumstances." "That's confidential. Agent Reeves, this man built bombs and planted them in a secured facility. He's not done. If you want to stop him before he tries again, you need to let me help." Another long pause. Then Reeves sighed. "I'll talk to Ms. Hale. But Carter, if you're playing me, if this is some kind of game, it's not a game, ma'am. It's pattern recognition. And I'm very good at it." 2 hours later, Finn's laptop pinged with an encrypted file transfer. Alexandra had sent him full access to Hale Dynamics' HR database, along with a message, "Find him." Finn opened the files and started reading. Terminations, resignations, layoffs, disciplinary actions. There were hundreds of names, thousands of pages of documentation. But Finn had learned patience in the Army, learned to sift through noise until the signal emerged. He filtered for terminations in the past 18 months. Then he filtered for employees with technical skills, engineering, IT, maintenance. Then he filtered for those who'd filed complaints or grievances. 12 names. He cross-referenced those names against the dates Marcus Teague had been hired. One name jumped out. Clinton Zane, electrical engineer hired in 2019, promoted twice. Then terminated in March of last year, 6 weeks before Marcus Teague's first badge swipe. Finn pulled up Zane's file. 42 years old, married, 1 daughter, worked in advanced weapons systems, specifically guidance algorithms for missile defense. Terminated for gross insubordination and security violations after he'd refused to sign off on a contract that he claimed was unsafe. There was a note in his file from Alexandra herself. "Mr. Zane's concerns have been reviewed and found to be without merit. His refusal to comply with company policy leaves us no choice but to terminate his employment immediately." Finn kept reading. After his termination, Zane had filed a wrongful termination suit. It was dismissed. He'd appealed, dismissed again. Then his wife had filed for divorce. Then his daughter had been diagnosed with leukemia, and the medical bills, no longer covered by Hale Dynamics insurance, had bankrupted him. Finn sat back, his stomach churning. Clinton Zane hadn't just lost his job, he'd lost everything. And he blamed Alexandra Hale. Finn called Agent Reeves. "I have your bomber. Clinton Zane, former electrical engineer. Terminated March 2024. He's using the alias Marcus Teague. How do you know? Because the timeline matches, because his skill set matches, and because he had motive, means, and opportunity. Finn sent her the file. He lost his job, his marriage, and his daughter's health because of a decision Alexandra made. He's not trying to make a statement, he's trying to make her pay. Reeves was silent for a moment. Then she said, "We're issuing a warrant. Do not approach this man, Carter. Do not investigate on your own. Are we clear?" "Crystal, ma'am." But even as he said it, Finn was already pulling up property records for Clinton Zane, because he knew something Agent Reeves didn't. Men like Zane didn't stop with one bomb. They stopped when they were finished, or when someone stopped them. Clinton Zane's last known address was a foreclosed townhouse in Staten Island, seized by the bank 4 months ago. But Finn knew better than to trust last known addresses. He pulled up utility records, cell phone pings, credit card transactions, anything that might tell him where Zane had gone after he'd lost his home. Nothing. The man had gone dark, but then Finn noticed something. 3 weeks ago, there'd been a 911 call from a storage facility in Brooklyn, a noise complaint, someone running a generator after hours. The call had been logged but never followed up on. Finn pulled the facility's address and cross-referenced it against Zane's financial records. Bingo. Storage Unit 237, rented under his wife's maiden name. Finn stared at the address on his screen. Then he looked down at the ankle monitor locked around his leg. He thought about Sarah, about Kabul, about the reports he'd filed and the warnings no one had believed. He thought about Audrey, asleep in the next room, and what would happen to her if he got himself killed doing something stupid. Then he picked up the encrypted phone and called Alexandra. "I know where he is," Finn said when she answered, "and I need you to trust me one more time." Alexandra's voice came through sharp and immediate. "Where?" "Storage facility in Red Hook, Unit 237, rented under his ex-wife's maiden name." Finn was already pulling up satellite images on his laptop, studying the layout. Single-story concrete building, 12-foot chain-link fence, security camera at the main gate. "But I need you to convince Agent Reeves to move fast. If Zane knows we've identified him, he'll rabbit. Or worse. Worse how? He's an electrical engineer who specializes in guidance systems. He knows how to build remote triggers, deadman switches, fail-safes." Finn zoomed in on the storage facility's power grid. If he's been working out of that unit for weeks, he's not just sitting on one bomb, he's sitting on an arsenal. He heard Alexandra breathing on the other end, heard the sound of her heels clicking against marble as she paced. "I'll call Reeves. But Carter, stay where you are. You're under house arrest. If you violate the terms, I know what happens, ma'am. But if the FBI goes in heavy tactical gear and helicopters, Zane will see them coming. He'll detonate whatever he has left, and people will die. You need someone who can talk him down, someone who understands what he's going through." "You?" "I've been where he is, ma'am. I've lost someone because the system failed. The difference is I didn't turn it into rage." Finn closed his laptop. "Let me try." There was a long silence. Then Alexandra said quietly, "My father told me about your wife, about how she died because your commanders didn't listen to your warnings. And I've been thinking about that all night, about how I almost did the same thing, how I almost ignored you because I was too arrogant to believe a security guard could see something I couldn't. Ma'am, let me finish. You saved my life yesterday, and now you're trying to save more lives, even though you're under house arrest, even though the FBI thinks you might be involved. That's not rage, Carter. That's honor. And I won't let you throw that away by violating your bail terms." Finn's jaw tightened. "Then what do you suggest?" "I suggest you let the professionals handle it. I'll make sure Reeves knows about the storage unit. I'll make sure they understand the risks. But you stay home with your daughter. That's an order." Before Finn could respond, she hung up. He sat there in the pre-dawn darkness, staring at the dead phone in his hand, feeling the weight of the ankle monitor like a shackle. Outside, the city was beginning to wake. Garbage trucks rumbling, pigeons cooing, someone's radio playing salsa music through an open window. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. But all Finn could hear was the ticking of a clock he couldn't see. He stood up, walked to Audrey's room, and eased the door open. She was sprawled across her bed like a starfish, one leg hanging off the edge, her mouth slightly open. On her nightstand sat a framed photo of Sarah, taken on a beach in North Carolina the summer before she deployed. She was laughing, her hair whipping in the wind, her eyes bright with life. Finn touched the frame gently. "I'm trying, Sarah," he whispered. "I'm trying to do what you'd want." But he wasn't sure what that was anymore. By the time the sun crested over the apartment buildings across the street, Finn had made coffee, scrambled eggs, and watched the news on his phone. The bombing at Hale Dynamics was the lead story on every channel. 3 injured, no fatalities, building closed indefinitely. Speculation ranged from domestic terrorism to corporate espionage. Not a single outlet mentioned Clinton Zane. Good. That meant the FBI was keeping it quiet. Audrey stumbled out of her room at 7:30, still in her pajamas, her hair sticking up in every direction. She squinted at him suspiciously. "You're cooking breakfast? On a weekday? That's weird. Maybe I just wanted to do something nice for my kid. Or maybe something's wrong and you're overcompensating." She climbed onto a stool at the kitchen counter and poked at the eggs. "These are overdone. Eat them anyway." She took a bite, chewed thoughtfully, then said, "You're going to do something stupid today, aren't you?" Finn looked at her. "What makes you say that?" "Because you have your mission face on. That's what Mom used to call it. The face you make when you're about to do something dangerous and noble and really, really dumb." "I'm not doing anything dangerous. I'm staying here, just like I promised." Liar. But she said it without heat, just matter-of-fact observation. "Just be careful, okay? I already lost one parent. I'm not interested in losing another." Finn crossed to her side of the counter and kissed the top of her head. "You're not going to lose me, kiddo. I promise." "That's what Mom said." The words hit him like a punch to the sternum. He pulled back, met her eyes. Sarah's eyes. And saw fear there, real and raw. "Audrey." "I know you can't promise, Dad. I know how the world works. But just try, okay? Try to come home." He held her for a long moment, memorizing the feel of her small shoulders, the smell of her strawberry shampoo, the way she fit perfectly under his chin. Then he stepped back and forced a smile. "I'll always try, kiddo, always." She nodded, sniffed once, and went back to eating her eggs. At 9:15, Finn's phone buzzed. Not the encrypted phone, his regular cell. The number was blocked, but he answered anyway. Carter. It was Agent Reeves, her voice clipped and professional. "We're moving on the storage facility at 1100 hours. I'm calling to inform you as a courtesy and to remind you that you are not, under any circumstances, to leave your residence. Clear?" "Crystal clear, Agent Reeves." "Good. I'll update you when we have him in custody." She hung up before he could respond. Finn set the phone down and looked at the clock. 9:16. He had 1 hour and 44 minutes before the FBI kicked down Clinton Zane's door. 1 hour and 44 minutes to decide whether to follow orders or follow his instincts. He thought about Sarah, about the market square, about the way her voice had sounded over the radio in those last seconds, confused, frightened, asking him what was happening. He thought about Audrey's face when she'd said, "I already lost one parent." Then he thought about the bomber, Clinton Zane, desperate and broken, sitting in a storage unit surrounded by explosives, waiting for someone to come for him, waiting for a reason to push the button. Finn walked to his bedroom, opened the closet, and pulled out a small black duffel bag. Inside were things he hadn't touched in 2 years: his old Army field jacket, a set of trauma shears, a laminated card with EOD protocols and frequency charts, and a photo of Sarah in her Red Cross vest, smiling at the camera. He zipped the bag closed, slung it over his shoulder, and walked to the front door. The ankle monitor beeped softly against his leg. A reminder, a warning, a promise of consequences. He opened the door anyway. The subway ride to Brooklyn took 40 minutes, and every second of it, Finn expected his phone to ring, Reeves calling to tell him they'd tracked his ankle monitor, that he was in violation of his bail terms, that he was going back to jail. But the phone stayed silent. He emerged from the Clark Street station into a neighborhood of converted warehouses and artisanal coffee shops, the East River glinting in the distance. The storage facility was 6 blocks south, tucked between a defunct shipping yard and a community garden. Finn walked slowly, counting his steps. 1, 2, 3, keeping his breathing steady, his heart rate controlled. When he reached the chain-link fence surrounding the facility, he stopped. No FBI vans, no tactical teams, no helicopters circling overhead. He checked his watch, 10:43. They'd be here in 17 minutes. Finn found a gap in the fence where the bottom edge had been pulled away from the concrete, probably by kids or copper thieves, and slipped through. The storage units were arranged in rows, numbered in sequence, each one secured with a heavy padlock. He moved quickly, staying low, until he found Unit 237. The door was closed, but not locked. A heavy chain dangled from the handle, cut cleanly through with bolt cutters. Someone had been here recently. Finn's pulse kicked up a notch. He pulled out his phone and texted Alexandra. At the storage facility, doors open, no sign of FBI. Something's wrong. Then he pushed the door open and stepped inside. The unit was maybe 10 by 15 feet, lit by a single camping lantern hanging from a hook in the ceiling. Workbenches lined the walls, cluttered with wires, circuit boards, soldering irons, and chemical containers labeled with hazard symbols. In the center of the room, on a folding table, sat a suitcase, hard-shell plastic, scratched and dented, with a digital timer duct taped to the top. 003824, 003823, 003822. Finn's breath caught. 38 minutes. Zane had set a timer, not a dead man switch, not a remote trigger. A simple countdown, probably armed the moment the door was opened, or the moment he knew the FBI was coming. Finn stepped closer, careful not to touch anything, his eyes scanning the device. The suitcase was wired to the timer through a relay board, military-grade, surplus, probably purchased online. The timer itself was connected to a blasting cap embedded in what looked like 20 pounds of C4 plastic explosive, molded into bricks and arranged in a ring around a central core. He knelt down slowly, pulled out his phone, and took photos from every angle. Then he texted them to Alexandra with a message. Active device, 37 minutes. Don't let FBI come in hot. Her response was immediate. Get out now! But Finn didn't move. He stared at the bomb, his mind shifting into the old rhythm. Observe, assess, prioritize. The timer was the primary trigger. Disabling it would require cutting the power source, but C4 was stable. It wouldn't detonate without a blasting cap. So the real threat was the cap itself, a small copper tube filled with lead azide, sensitive to heat, shock, and electrical current. If he could remove the cap, the bomb was inert. If he couldn't, 37 minutes from now, this entire block would be a crater. Finn heard footsteps outside, multiple sets, moving fast. He turned toward the door just as Agent Reeves appeared, flanked by 2 tactical officers in full body armor. Carter, step away from the device. Finn raised his hand slowly. Agent Reeves, listen to me. I said step away. There's a timer, 36 minutes. If you evacuate now, you can clear a 4-block radius before it detonates. Reeves's face went white. She keyed her radio. All units, fall back. Repeat, fall back and establish a perimeter at 500 meters. Bomb squad en route. ETA 20 minutes. They won't make it in time, Finn said quietly. Then we evacuate and let it blow. We're not risking lives to save a storage unit. What about the apartment building 2 blocks south? The elementary school 3 blocks east? The community garden with 50 volunteers pulling weeds right now? Finn gestured to the bomb. This thing has enough explosive to level everything within 300 meters. You evacuate, people die. You let me try, maybe nobody dies. Reeves stared at him, her jaw working. You're under house arrest, Carter. You violated your bail. If I let you touch that bomb and it goes off, then I'm dead and you have one less problem. Finn turned back to the device. Agent Reeves, I've done this 100 times. I know what I'm doing. That was a war zone. This is Brooklyn. Explosives don't care where they are, ma'am. They just care about physics. He met her eyes. Let me do my job. For a long moment, Reeves didn't move. Then she turned to her team. Clear the building. Evacuate 3 blocks in every direction. Silent alarm, no sirens, no panic. Move. The officers disappeared. Reeves lingered in the doorway, her hand on her sidearm, watching Finn like he might detonate himself. I'm staying, she said. Bad idea. Then we'll both have bad ideas. She pulled a folding chair from the corner and sat down. You've got 34 minutes, Carter. Make them count. Finn nodded, set his phone on the workbench where she could see the timer, and knelt beside the bomb. His hands were steady. His breathing was controlled. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he could hear Sarah's voice, calm and clear. Count something. Give your brain something to hold on to. 1. The timer. 2. The relay board. 3. The blasting cap. He pulled out his trauma shears and started cutting away the duct tape. The first thing Finn did was trace the wiring. The timer was connected to the relay board through a simple 2-wire circuit, positive and negative, red and black. Standard configuration, the kind you'd find in any EOD manual. But Zane was smarter than standard. He'd added a secondary loop, a thin green wire that ran from the timer to a small battery pack hidden beneath the C4 bricks. A bypass circuit. If Finn cut the main power, the secondary would kick in and complete the circuit anyway. "Talk to me, Carter," Reeves said from the doorway. "What are we looking at?" "Dual trigger system, primary timer connected to the blasting cap, secondary battery as a failsafe. If I disable one, the other fires." Finn wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. He knew someone would try to disarm it. "Can you?" "I don't know yet." The timer ticked down. 003147. Finn pulled out his phone and opened a frequency analyzer app, something he'd downloaded years ago, back when he was still in the Army. He scanned the bomb for RF signals, looking for remote triggers, cell phone detonators, anything that could bypass the physical wiring. Nothing. The device was entirely mechanical. That was good. Mechanical meant predictable. Mechanical meant he could follow the logic, understand the design, find the weakness. He just had to find it before the timer hit 0. "Where's Zane?" Finn asked, not looking up from the bomb. "Unknown. We have units checking his ex-wife's address, his daughter's hospital, every known associate, but he's in the wind." "He's not in the wind. He's watching." Reeves straightened. "What?" "He built this bomb to be found. He set the timer knowing we'd have just enough time to try to disarm it. That's not suicide, that's theater. He wants to see if we're smart enough to survive. Or he wants to watch us fail. Maybe." Finn studied the bypass circuit, tracing it with his eyes, counting the connection points. But if he's watching, he's close. Check the rooftops. Check the street cameras. He's here. Reeves keyed her radio and relayed the order. Then she stepped closer, her shadow falling across the workbench. "Carter, if you can't disarm this thing, I need to know. I need time to get people out." "You'll know, ma'am. Trust me." The timer clicked down. 002815. Finn picked up a pair of needle-nose pliers and carefully lifted the edge of the duct tape holding the blasting cap in place. The cap itself was a standard military issue, 6.4 millimeters in diameter, maybe 2 inches long, filled with lead-azide and a thin wire filament. The filament was the key. When electricity passed through it, it heated up, ignited the lead-azide, and triggered the C4. No electricity, no ignition. No ignition, no explosion. Simple. Except the filament was connected to both the primary timer and the secondary battery. If Finn cut one, the other would fire. If he cut both simultaneously, the shock might be enough to detonate the cap anyway. He needed a third option. "Agent Reeves, I need something." "Name it." "Ice. As much as you can find, as fast as you can get it." She blinked. "Ice?" "Lead-azide is temperature sensitive. If I can cool the cap below its activation threshold, the filament won't ignite even if it receives current. But I need to bring it down to at least 10 degrees Celsius, and I need to do it without shocking the system." Reeves didn't ask questions. She bolted out of the storage unit, her radio already at her lips. Finn turned back to the bomb and did the only thing he could do. He waited. And counted. 1. The timer. 002533. 2. His heartbeat. 72 beats per minute. 3. His breathing. In for 4 seconds. Out for 4 seconds. 4. The seconds until Reeves returned. 60. 70. 90. At 2 minutes and 18 seconds, she reappeared with a plastic cooler, ice sloshing inside. Community garden next door. They had a lemonade stand. Finn almost laughed. Instead, he grabbed a handful of ice and packed it carefully around the blasting cap, building a small mound that covered the copper tube completely. Then he waited, watching the thermometer on his phone app, counting down the degrees. 20 Celsius, 15 An, 12, 10, 8. Okay, Finn said quietly. I'm going to cut the primary wire. If this works, the secondary will try to fire, but the cap will be too cold to ignite. If it doesn't work, we'll know, Reeves finished. Finn picked up the trauma shears, positioned them around the red wire leading from the timer to the relay board, and squeezed. The wire parted with a soft snip. The timer stopped. 0:22:41. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the green bypass wire sparked, a bright flash, a hiss of burning insulation. The battery pack discharged, sending current through the secondary circuit, through the relay board, through the wire leading to the blasting cap. Finn held his breath. The cap didn't fire. The ice had worked. Reeves exhaled so hard she nearly collapsed. Jesus Christ, Carter. Finn didn't respond. He was already moving, carefully lifting the blasting cap out of the C4, cradling it like a newborn, and placing it gently into a blast containment bag Reeves pulled from her tactical vest. Then he sat back on his heels, wiped his face, and closed his eyes. We're clear, ma'am. Reeves keyed her radio. Device is safe. Repeat. Device is safe. Bomb squad can stand down. She looked at Finn, and for the first time since he'd met her, she smiled. A small, exhausted, genuine smile. You're insane, you know that? Probably, Finn said. But you're alive. They sat there in the silence, surrounded by wires and ice and the faint smell of burnt insulation, until the bomb squad arrived 20 minutes later. The lead technician, a grizzled sergeant named DeMarco, took one look at the disassembled device and whistled low. Who disarmed this? He did, Reeves said, nodding at Finn. DeMarco studied Finn for a long moment. You EOD? Was. Long time ago. Well, you haven't lost your touch. DeMarco knelt beside the bomb, examining the bypass circuit, the frozen blasting cap, the severed wires. This is textbook work. Better than textbook. You thinking about coming out of retirement? I'm thinking about not going to jail, Finn said dryly. DeMarco laughed. Fair enough. As the bomb squad carefully transported the device to their van, Reeves pulled Finn aside. You violated your bail terms, Carter. You left your residence, removed your ankle monitor, yes, I noticed, and inserted yourself into an active federal investigation. By all rights, I should arrest you right now. Yes, ma'am. But you also just saved about 200 lives, including mine. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to go back to your apartment. You're going to put that ankle monitor back on, and you're going to pretend you never left. Understood? Finn met her eyes. What about Zane? We'll find him. Will you? Finn gestured to the storage unit. He built this bomb knowing someone would try to disarm it. He set the timer knowing we'd have just enough time. That's not desperation, Agent Reeves. That's control. He's not finished. Boom. Reeves's jaw tightened. Then what do you suggest? Let me talk to him. Absolutely not. Why? Because I'm a civilian? Because I violated my bail? Or because you don't trust me? Because he's a bomber, Carter. And bombers don't negotiate. They detonate. Not all of them. Finn thought about Kabul, about the market square, about the young man with the vest who'd stood frozen in the middle of the street, his thumb on the trigger, tears streaming down his face. Finn had talked to him for 40 minutes while EOD worked to jam the signal. The kid had surrendered, lived to see trial. Some of them just want to be heard. Reeves shook her head. I can't authorize that. Then don't authorize it. Just don't stop me. Before she could respond, Finn's phone buzzed. The encrypted phone Alexandra had given him. He pulled it out, saw the message, and felt his blood run cold. He's at my building. He's at my daughter. Finn didn't remember running. He didn't remember pushing past Reeves, vaulting the chain-link fence, sprinting 6 blocks to the subway station. All he remembered was the message on his screen, the words burned into his brain like a brand. Your daughter is beautiful. She has her mother's eyes. The subway ride back to Queens took an eternity. Finn stood pressed against the doors, his heart hammering, his mind racing through scenarios. Zane in the lobby, Zane in the stairwell, Zane standing outside Audrey's school with a backpack full of explosives. He tried calling Mrs. Chen. No answer. He tried calling Audrey's school. The line was busy. When the train finally screeched into his stop, Finn exploded onto the platform and ran, through the turnstile, up the stairs, down the street, his lungs burning, his legs screaming. He burst through the door of his apartment building and took the stairs 3 at a time, not trusting the elevator, not trusting anything. The door to 3B was open. Finn's world narrowed to a pinpoint. He drew the small folding knife he kept in his pocket. Not much, but something, and stepped inside. Audrey? Silence. He moved through the apartment, checking the kitchen, the living room, his bedroom. Everything was in place, nothing disturbed. Then he heard it, a soft voice coming from Audrey's room. "Dad, don't freak out." Finn pushed open the door. Audrey was sitting on her bed, cross-legged, her laptop open in front of her. And sitting in her desk chair, hands folded calmly in his lap, was a man in his 40s with thinning hair and tired eyes. Clinton Zane. "Hello, Mr. Carter," Zane said quietly. "Your daughter and I have been having a very interesting conversation." Finn's hand tightened on the knife. "Step away from her." "Dad, wait." Audrey held up her hands. "He's not here to hurt me. He's here to talk to you." "Audrey, get out of the room, now." "I won't." Her voice was steady, certain. "Because if I leave, he'll disappear. And you need to hear what he has to say." Finn stared at his daughter, at the man who'd tried to kill Alexandra Hale, and felt the world tilt on its axis. "You have 10 seconds to explain why I shouldn't call the FBI." "Because they won't listen," Zane said. "They never listen. But you will, Mr. Carter. Because you've been where I am. You've lost someone because the system failed. You've filed reports that were ignored. You've screamed into the void and heard nothing back." He leaned forward slightly. "Your daughter told me about your wife, about Kabul, about how you tried to save her and couldn't. You don't get to talk about my wife." "Why not? Because I'm a bomber? Because I'm a monster?" Zane's voice cracked. "I'm a father, Mr. Carter, just like you. And I watched my daughter die because Alexandra Hale decided her profit margins were more important than safety protocols. I tried to stop it. I filed complaints. I went to the board. I went to the press. And they fired me, destroyed me, took everything." Finn's grip on the knife loosened slightly. "So you built a bomb." "I built justice. I built accountability. I built the only language people like her understand. You built a weapon that could have killed dozens of innocent people. I built a weapon that was never going to detonate." Zane reached into his jacket, slowly, carefully, and pulled out a small remote control. "This is the master trigger. It's been in my pocket the entire time. The timer in the storage unit? Theater. I wanted to see if anyone was smart enough to disarm it, and you were." He set the remote on the desk. "I'm not here to kill anyone, Mr. Carter. I'm here to make sure people remember what Alexandra Hale did, what she's still doing." Audrey looked at her father. "He showed me the files, Dad, the safety reports, the internal memos. Alexandra knew the guidance system was flawed. She knew it could fail, but she pushed it through anyway because the contract was worth $800 million. "That doesn't justify terrorism," Finn said. "No," Zane agreed. "It doesn't, but it does justify exposure. And if I turn myself in now, the FBI will bury me. The media will call me a terrorist, and nothing will change." He stood slowly, hands visible. "But if you help me, if you make sure the truth comes out, I'll surrender. No more bombs, no more threats, just accountability." Finn looked at his daughter, at the man who'd tried to kill his boss, at the remote controls sitting on the desk like a coiled snake. And he thought about Sarah, about the market square, about the reports he'd written that no one had read. He thought about justice and revenge and the thin line between them. Then he pulled out his phone and dialed Agent Reeves. "I have Clinton Zane," he said when she answered, "and I think you're going to want to hear what he has to say." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for 3 full seconds. Then Agent Reeves's voice came through, tight and controlled. "Say that again." "Clinton Zane is in my apartment. He came here to talk. He's unarmed and he's willing to surrender, but he has conditions. Carter, do not negotiate with him. Do not. Agent Reeves, he's sitting 6 feet from my daughter. He's had 20 minutes to hurt her, and he hasn't. He's not here for violence. He's here because no one would listen. Finn kept his eyes on Zane, watching for any sudden movement. I need you to come here quietly. No tactical teams. No helicopters. Just you and maybe one other agent. If he sees a SWAT convoy, he'll disappear and we'll be back to square one. Another pause. Finn could hear muffled voices in the background. Someone arguing, someone else on another line. Give me the address, Reeves finally said. And Carter, if this is a trap, if you're working with him, it's not a trap, ma'am. It's a chance. Don't waste it. He gave her the address and hung up. Then he looked at Zane, who sat perfectly still in Audrey's desk chair, his hands folded like a man at a church service. The FBI will be here in 15 minutes, Finn said. You've got until then to convince me you're not just another terrorist with a manifesto. I'm not a terrorist, Mr. Carter. I'm an engineer who tried to do the right thing and got destroyed for it. Zane gestured to Audrey's laptop. Show him. Audrey turned the screen toward her father. On it were dozens of documents. Internal emails, safety assessments, board meeting minutes, all stamped with the Hale Dynamics logo. Finn scanned them quickly, his eyes catching on phrases that made his stomach turn. Acceptable failure rate, 3.7% to yet. Cost of redesign exceeds projected losses from potential malfunctions. Legal recommends we proceed. Any incidents can be managed through settlement. And then at the bottom of one email chain, a message from Alexandra Hale herself. We have a delivery deadline and a contract to fulfill. Engineering's concerns are noted, but do not outweigh our strategic priorities. Move forward with production. The email was dated 14 months ago. 3 weeks later, according to the files, a guidance system had failed during a training exercise in Nevada. The missile had veered off course and struck a support vehicle. 2 soldiers died. The incident was classified as operator error. Finn looked up at Zane. Where did you get these? I kept copies. Called it insurance back then. Didn't realize I'd need it to prove I wasn't insane. Zane's voice was hollow. I went to Alexandra first, told her the math didn't work, that the error margins were too high. She thanked me for my diligence and told me the system had been vetted by 3 independent reviewers. I found out later those reviewers were paid consultants, people who'd rubber stamp anything for the right price. So you went over her head. I went to the board. Her father, Robert Hale, listened for about 5 minutes before telling me I was out of my depth, that I didn't understand the broader picture, that defense contracting required calculated risks. Zane's hands clenched. 2 days later, I was fired for insubordination and violations of my NDA. They froze my severance, blacklisted me in the industry. My wife left. My daughter's medical insurance lapsed right when she needed it most. Audrey spoke up quietly. She died 4 months ago, leukemia. She was 12. Finn closed his eyes. When he opened them, Zane was staring at the floor, his shoulders shaking. Her name was Emma, Zane said. She wanted to be a veterinarian. She had this ridiculous plan to open a shelter for 3-legged dogs because she said they were the ones nobody wanted. And I couldn't even afford the experimental treatment that might have saved her because Alexandra Hale decided I was expendable. I'm sorry, Finn said, and he meant it. I'm sorry for your daughter. I'm sorry the system failed you. But you tried to kill people. You planted bombs in a building full of workers who had nothing to do with your firing. I planted bombs in a building after hours, in locations designed to create panic but minimal casualties. The timer was set for when the building would be mostly empty. The devices were placed to cause structural damage, not mass death. Zane looked up, his eyes red but steady. I wanted her to feel what I felt. Trapped, helpless, terrified. I wanted her to understand what it's like when the walls close in and nobody's coming to save you. And did she? Finn asked. Did Alexandra Hale learn anything from being locked in a panic room while her building burned? I don't know. But you did save her, and that's why I'm here. Because if there's anyone who might actually give a damn about the truth, it's the guy who's been ignored his whole life and kept trying anyway. Finn heard footsteps in the hallway, soft, measured, professional. He moved to the door and opened it before anyone could knock. Agent Reeves stood in the corridor with one other agent, a younger man with sharp eyes and a hand resting on his sidearm. "He's in my daughter's room," Finn said. "He's unarmed. He says he'll surrender if you guarantee the evidence he has gets reviewed by someone outside Hale Dynamics' sphere of influence." Reeves looked past him into the apartment. "And you believe him?" "I believe he's telling the truth about the documents. Whether that justifies what he did, that's for a court to decide." Reeves nodded slowly and stepped inside. The other agent followed, positioning himself near the door. When they entered Audrey's room, Zane stood immediately, hands raised, palms out. "Agent Reeves," he said, "thank you for coming. Mr. Zane, you're under arrest for terrorism, attempted murder, destruction of federal property, and about a dozen other charges I'll read to you once we're downtown." Reeves pulled out a pair of handcuffs. "But first, I want to see these documents Mr. Carter mentioned." Zane nodded to Audrey, who turned the laptop toward the FBI agents. Reeves leaned in, scrolling through the files, her expression darkening with each screen. The other agent pulled out his phone and started photographing the documents. "These are internal Hale Dynamics communications," Reeves said. "How did you obtain them?" "I was the senior engineer on the project. I had access. And when I saw what was happening, I backed everything up before they could scrub the servers. That's theft of proprietary information. That's evidence of criminal negligence, maybe manslaughter, depending on how you interpret those Nevada deaths." Zane's voice hardened. "You want to arrest me for stealing emails? Fine. But I want those documents entered into evidence. I want an independent investigation. And I want Alexandra Hale to answer for what she did." Reeves studied him for a long moment. Then she turned to her partner. "Anderson, call the U.S. Attorney's Office. Tell them we need someone from the DOJ, someone with no ties to defense contractors, to review these files, and get someone from DOD's Inspector General on the line. If there's any truth to this—" "There is," Finn interrupted. "I've seen enough military procurement disasters to recognize one. Those emails show a pattern of prioritizing profit over safety. If the Nevada incident was caused by a guidance system Hale Dynamics knew was flawed, that's not just negligence, that's felony murder." Reeves's eyes snapped to him. "You're a security guard, Carter, not a lawyer. I'm a soldier who lost his wife because people ignored warnings. I know what institutional failure looks like." He gestured to the laptop. "This is it." Zane spoke up quietly. "I'll plead guilty to the bombing. I'll take whatever sentence you give me, but I won't let Emma die for nothing. I won't let those soldiers die for nothing. Someone has to be held accountable." Reeves pulled out her handcuffs. "Turn around, Mr. Zane." He did. She cuffed him carefully, professionally, then read him his Miranda rights in a voice that carried no emotion. When she finished, she looked at Finn. "You should have called this in immediately. You should have secured the suspect and waited for backup. Instead, you had a conversation with a bomber while your daughter sat 3 feet away. What the hell were you thinking?" Finn met her gaze. "I was thinking that sometimes people don't need to be arrested. They need to be heard. And if we're ever going to stop this cycle of violence and retaliation, someone has to be willing to listen. That's not your job." "Maybe it should be." Tss. Reeves shook her head but didn't argue further. She guided Zane toward the door, then paused. "Carter, you're still under house arrest. You violated your terms twice today. Technically, I should revoke your bail and remand you to custody." "I know. But you also disarmed a live explosive device and prevented a catastrophic loss of life. And you just convinced a domestic terrorist to surrender peacefully. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay in this apartment. You're going to put that ankle monitor back on. And you're going to wait for my call. Because if even half of what's in those files is true, this investigation just got a lot bigger than one bomber. And I'm going to need someone who understands how to see patterns." "Yes, ma'am." Reeves led Zane out of the apartment. Finn watched them go, then closed the door and locked it. 1 bolt, 2 bolts, 3. When he turned around, Audrey was standing in the hallway, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "You're mad," Finn said. "I'm not mad. I'm terrified." Her voice cracked. "He was in my room, Dad. A bomber was sitting in my room, and you weren't here, and I didn't know what to do, so I just talked to him, like you would have." Finn crossed the distance between them and pulled her into his arms. She resisted for half a second, then collapsed against him, shaking. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry I wasn't here. He wasn't going to hurt me. I could tell. He just wanted someone to listen. He kept talking about his daughter, about how nobody cared when she died, about how the world just moved on like she never existed." Audrey pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Is that what it was like with Mom? Did the world just move on?" Finn's chest tightened. "Yeah, kiddo, it did." "That's not fair." "No, it's not." They stood there in the narrow hallway, holding each other, while outside the city hummed with life and indifference. After a while, Audrey pulled away and looked up at her father. "Are you going to get in trouble for helping him?" "Probably." "Was it worth it?" Finn thought about the bomb in the storage unit, about the lives he'd saved, about the documents on Audrey's laptop and the possibility, however small, that justice might actually be served. He thought about Sarah, about the market square, about all the warnings that had been ignored until it was too late. "Yeah," he said. It was worth it. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of phone calls, interviews, and waiting. The FBI seized Audrey's laptop as evidence, along with every file Zane had provided. The U.S. Attorney's Office opened an investigation into Hale Dynamics safety protocols. The Department of Defense launched an inquiry into the Nevada incident, and the media, sensing blood in the water, descended on the story like sharks. Finn stayed in his apartment, as ordered, watching the news unfold on his phone while Audrey did homework at the kitchen table. Every hour, his phone buzzed with updates from Agent Reeves. Zane was cooperating fully. The documents were being authenticated. Forensic accountants were combing through Hale Dynamics' financial records. The investigation was expanding faster than anyone had anticipated. On the third day, Alexandra Hale appeared on television. Finn was making coffee when Audrey called him over to the couch, where she'd pulled up a live stream on her tablet. The press conference was being held in the lobby of Hale Dynamics Tower, which had been cleared for limited access. Alexandra stood behind a podium, flanked by her father and a team of lawyers. She looked composed, controlled, every inch the CEO who'd built an empire through sheer force of will, but her eyes were different, harder, colder. "Thank you all for coming," Alexandra began. "Over the past few days, serious allegations have been made against Hale Dynamics regarding the safety protocols of our guidance systems. I want to address these allegations directly and transparently." Finn leaned forward, his coffee forgotten. "First, let me be clear. The safety of our products and the integrity of our processes are the highest priorities of this company. Every system we produce undergoes rigorous testing and independent review. The suggestions that we knowingly deployed flawed technology are not only false, but deeply offensive to the thousands of engineers and technicians who work tirelessly to protect those who serve our country." "She's lying," Audrey said flatly. "Shh, let her finish." "Second, the individual who made these allegations, Clinton Zane, is a former employee who was terminated for cause after repeated violations of company policy and insubordination. His claims are the product of a personal vendetta, and his actions, planting explosive devices in our headquarters, demonstrate a reckless disregard for human life that undermines any credibility he might claim." Alexandra paused, her gaze sweeping the cameras. "However, in the interest of transparency, Hale Dynamics is cooperating fully with federal investigators. We have provided access to all relevant documentation, and we welcome an independent review of our safety protocols. If mistakes were made, we will own them. If improvements are needed, we will implement them. But we will not allow this company to be destroyed by the violent actions of one disgruntled individual." The reporters erupted with questions, but Alexandra stepped away from the podium without answering. Her father leaned into the microphone. "Thank you. We'll have more information as the investigation continues." The stream ended. Audrey looked at her father. "She's going to bury it, isn't she? She's going to make Zane look like a crazy person and pretend none of this happened." "Maybe," Finn said. "Or maybe she just made a mistake." "What kind of mistake?" "The kind where you lie on national television while federal investigators are building a case against you. If those documents are real, and I think they are, she just committed perjury in front of 50 million people." Audrey considered this. Then she smiled slightly. "Good.
An hour later, Finn's phone rang. It was Alexandra. Carter, I need to see you. I'm under house arrest, ma'am. I can't leave my apartment. I'm aware, which is why I'm coming to you. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She hung up before he could respond. Finn looked at the phone, then at Audrey, who was watching him with raised eyebrows. The CEO is coming here? She asked. Apparently. This should be interesting. 23 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Finn checked the peephole, old habits, and saw Alexandra Hale standing in the hallway, flanked by 2 private security guards in dark suits. He opened the door. Ms. Hale. Mr. Carter, may I come in? He stepped aside. Alexandra entered, glanced around the small apartment, the worn furniture, the textbooks stacked on the coffee table, the framed photo of Sarah on the mantel, and something in her expression softened. This is your home, she said quietly. It is. It's nice, lived in, real. She turned to face him. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. All right. Do you believe Clinton Zane? Do you believe those documents are real? Finn met her eyes without flinching. Yes, ma'am, I do. Alexandra exhaled slowly, her shoulders sagging. So do I. The words hung in the air like a confession. Audrey, who'd been pretending to do homework at the kitchen table, looked up sharply. Then why did you just lie on television? Finn asked. Because my father told me to. Because our lawyers told me to. Because if I admit that Hale Dynamics knowingly deployed flawed technology, the company will be destroyed. Lawsuits, criminal charges, contract cancellations will be bankrupt within 6 months. 30,000 people will lose their jobs. Our stock will crater. And every project we've spent decades building will disappear. And if you keep lying, more people will die. Alexandra's jaw tightened. I know. Then what are you doing here, Ms. Hale? She reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive. This contains every internal communication related to the guidance system project, every email, every memo, every safety assessment, everything Clinton Zane had, plus things he didn't. I pulled them from our private servers before our IT department could scrub them. Finn stared at the flash drive. Why are you giving this to me? Because you're the only person I trust to do the right thing with it. The FBI will use it to build their case. The media will sensationalize it. My father will try to destroy it. But you... She pressed the drive into his hand. You'll make sure it gets to someone who can actually change things. Someone who cares more about truth than politics. Ms. Hale, if I give this to the authorities, it will destroy your company. Your father. You. I know. Her voice was steady, resolved. But you were right, Carter. In that panic room, when you asked me if I was willing to die because I didn't listen, I realized something. I've been so focused on winning, on building, on proving I was smarter and tougher than everyone else, that I forgot what any of this was supposed to be for. We make weapons to protect people. And if we're cutting corners, if we're prioritizing profit over safety, then we're not protecting anyone. We're just playing a game with other people's lives. Finn looked down at the flash drive, then at Alexandra. This will cost you everything. Maybe. Or maybe it's the only way to save what actually matters. She stepped back toward the door. You saved my life twice, Carter. Once in the panic room, and once when you helped Zane surrender instead of letting him disappear. Now I'm asking you to save something else, the integrity of what we're supposed to stand for. And your father? What will he do when he finds out? Probably disown me, fire me, write me out of the will. Alexandra smiled faintly. But I'll survive. I learned that from you. She left without another word, her security guards following like shadows. Finn closed the door and stood in the silence, the flash drive heavy in his palm. Audrey walked over and looked up at him. What are you going to do? I'm going to count to 10, Finn said, and then I'm going to call Agent Reeves. He counted 1, 2, 3, all the way to 10. Then he made the call. The scandal broke 72 hours later. Major news networks led with the story. Defense contractor Hale Dynamics under federal investigation for safety violations. The documents on the flash drive, authenticated by forensic analysts and corroborated by testimony from former employees,
painted a damning picture of systematic negligence, profit-driven decision-making, and deliberate concealment of safety risks. The Nevada incident was reclassified as criminal negligence. The families of the two soldiers who died filed wrongful death lawsuits. Congressional hearings were scheduled, and Alexandra Hale, in a surprise move, resigned as CEO and agreed to cooperate fully with federal investigators in exchange for immunity. Her father, Robert Hale, was less accommodating. He retained a team of elite defense attorneys and issued a statement denying all wrongdoing. The legal battle, analysts predicted, would take years, but the narrative had shifted, and for the first time in his life, Finn Carter felt like the warnings hadn't been ignored. They'd been heard, and people were listening. Agent Reeves called him on the 6th day after the press conference. "Carter, we're dropping all charges related to your bail violations. The U.S. Attorney has reviewed your actions and determined that your intervention was instrumental in preventing further loss of life and securing critical evidence in a federal investigation. You're free to go." "Thank you, ma'am." "Don't thank me. Thank your boss." Former boss, I guess. Alexandra Hale spent the last week lobbying everyone from the Attorney General to the Director of the FBI to make sure you didn't get buried in this. She thinks you're some kind of hero. "I'm not a hero, Agent Reeves. I'm just a guy who pays attention." "Well, keep paying attention, Carter, because I have a feeling we're going to need people like you." That night, Finn took Audrey to a diner in Astoria. The kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like burnt rubber but was somehow perfect anyway. They ordered pancakes and milkshakes, and for the first time in months, Finn felt like he could breathe. "So what happens now?" Audrey asked, drizzling syrup over her stack. "Do you go back to being a security guard?" "I don't know. Maybe. Maybe not. You should do something bigger, like consulting or teaching or, I don't know, running for office." Finn laughed. "I'm not running for office, kiddo." "Why not? You're good at seeing things other people miss. You're good at making people listen. That's basically what politicians are supposed to do, right?" "Politicians mostly just argue and raise money." "Then you'd be terrible at it." "Never mind," she grinned. "But seriously, Dad, you can't just go back to checking IDs at a gate. You're too good for that." "I like checking IDs. It's simple, predictable." It's boring, and you're not a boring person." Audrey took a sip of her milkshake. "Mom wouldn't want you to be boring." Finn's throat tightened. "What do you think Mom would want?" Audrey thought about it for a long moment. "I think she'd want you to use what you learned, what you survived, not just to keep yourself safe, but to help other people stay safe too. That's what she did, right? She went to war zones to help people. She didn't hide from danger. She ran toward it because she thought she could make a difference." She looked at her father. "You're the same way. You just pretend you're not." Finn reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "When did you get so smart?" "I've always been smart. You just weren't paying attention." He laughed, and it felt good. It felt like hope. 2 weeks later, Finn received a formal letter from Hale Dynamics. Inside was a severance check, generous, more than he'd expected, and a brief note from Robert Hale himself. "Mr. Carter, while I do not agree with my daughter's decision to cooperate with federal authorities, I recognize that you acted with integrity throughout this ordeal. Hale Dynamics will be restructuring over the coming months, and I wanted to personally ensure you were compensated fairly for your service. Additionally, I would like to extend an offer. If you are interested in returning to the security field in a leadership capacity, I believe there is a place for someone with your skills and perspective in the industry. Please contact my office if you wish to discuss further. Respectfully, Robert Hale." Finn read the letter twice, then set it down and stared out the window. Leadership capacity, skills and perspective. It was an olive branch, or maybe a recruitment pitch. Either way, it was an opportunity, but he wasn't sure he wanted it. His phone buzzed. A text from Alexandra. "Did you get my father's letter?" "Yes." "Are you going to take him up on it?" "I don't know." "Are you going to tell me what to do?" "No, but I will tell you this. The industry needs people like you. People who care more about doing the right thing than covering their ass. If you don't take my father's offer, take someone else's. Or build your own. Just don't go back to standing at a gate. You're better than that." Finn smiled and texted back.
I'll think about it. He set the phone down and looked at the framed photo of Sarah on the mantel. She was laughing in the picture, her hair blowing in the wind, her eyes bright with life. And for the first time in 2 years, when Finn looked at her face, he didn't feel guilt. He felt gratitude. "I'm trying," he whispered. "I'm still trying." And in the silence of his small apartment, with the city humming outside and his daughter humming in her room, Finn Carter felt something he hadn't felt since Kabul. He felt like maybe, just maybe, he was exactly where he was supposed to be.
3 weeks after the letter arrived, Finn was standing in line at the bodega downstairs, buying milk and cereal, when his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but he answered anyway. "Mr. Carter, this is Diane Fremont from the Senate Armed Services Committee. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" Finn glanced at the clerk, who was ringing up his groceries with the speed of continental drift. "I have a few minutes." "Excellent. Senator Whitaker asked me to reach out to you regarding your testimony in the Hale Dynamics investigation. We're holding hearings next month, and your perspective as both a former EOD specialist and the individual who uncovered critical evidence would be invaluable. Would you be willing to testify?" Finn paused, milk carton in hand. "Testify? In front of Congress?" "Yes, sir. We understand it's a significant ask, but this investigation has implications far beyond one company. We're looking at systemic failures in defense procurement oversight. Your experience could help shape future policy." He thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Then he said, "I'll do it." "Wonderful. I'll send over the details. Thank you, Mr. Carter." When he got back to the apartment, Audrey was at the kitchen table building what appeared to be a small robot out of spare electronics and duct tape. She looked up when he walked in. "Who was on the phone?" "The Senate. They want me to testify about Hale Dynamics." Audrey's eyes went wide. "Like actual Congress? With cameras and everything?" "Apparently." "Dad, that's huge. You're going to be on C-SPAN. We should get you a new tie." "I have a tie. You have one tie, and it's from 2015. We're getting you a new tie." She went back to soldering a wire to a circuit board. "Also, you should write down what you're going to say. Practice it. Make sure you don't accidentally call a senator ma'am when they're a sir or vice versa." "I think I can handle it, kiddo." Famous last words. The hearing was scheduled for the second week of November, which gave Finn exactly 26 days to prepare. He spent them reading transcripts of previous hearings, reviewing the documents he'd provided to the FBI, and talking to Agent Reeves, who'd been subpoenaed as well. She gave him advice over coffee at a diner near the FBI field office. Don't volunteer information they don't ask for. Answer the question, then stop talking. Some of these senators are looking for sound bites, and if you give them too much rope, they'll hang you with it. Noted. And don't let them rattle you. They'll try to paint you as a vigilante or a loose cannon. Stay calm. Stick to the facts. And for God's sake, don't mention that you violated your bail terms to disarm a bomb and apprehend a suspect. That's not going to play well with the law and order crowd. Finn smirked. So lie? I didn't say lie. I said don't volunteer. She leaned back in her seat. For what it's worth, Carter, you did good work. You saw something nobody else saw, and you acted on it. That takes guts. Just don't let Congress turn it into a circus. I'll do my best. 2 days before the hearing, Alexandra called. Finn was at Audrey's school, sitting in the bleachers watching her science club launch model rockets in the football field. He stepped away to take the call. Carter, I wanted to give you a heads up. My father's going to testify at the same hearing. He's going to try to discredit you. I figured. He's going to say you're a disgruntled employee with a vendetta, that you manipulated evidence, that you coerced me into cooperating. Her voice was tight. I'm testifying too, and I'm going to set the record straight, but it's going to get ugly. It was always going to get ugly, ma'am. That's how these things work. I know. I wanted to thank you for everything, for saving my life, for believing me when I gave you that flash drive, for not letting my father bury this. She paused. You could have taken his offer, you know. He would have paid you well, set you up for life. Money's not everything, Ms. Hale. No, it's not. She sighed. Good luck in Washington. And Carter, don't let them make you small. You're bigger than they think. She hung up before he could respond. Finn looked out at the field. where Audrey was adjusting the fins on a rocket, her face scrunched in concentration. When the rocket launched a moment later, it soared straight and true, arcing into the November sky before deploying its parachute and drifting back to Earth. Audrey jumped up and down, pumping her fist. Finn smiled. Some things, he thought, really were simple. You built something carefully. You launched it with precision, and if you did it right, it flew. The hearing room in the Hart Senate office building was larger than Finn had expected. Marble floors, wood-paneled walls, rows of seats filled with journalists, lobbyists, and curious citizens. At the front of the room, a semicircle of senators sat behind an elevated bench, looking down at the witness table like judges at a trial. Finn sat in the second row, waiting his turn. Alexandra was seated 3 chairs down, flanked by lawyers. Robert Hale was across the aisle, his expression carved from stone. Agent Reeves sat in the front row, reviewing notes on a tablet. Senator Whitaker, a silver-haired woman from Michigan, gavelled the session to order. This hearing of the Senate Armed Services Committee will come to order. We are here today to investigate serious allegations of safety violations and procurement fraud involving Hale Dynamics Corporation, one of the nation's largest defense contractors. We will hear testimony from multiple witnesses, including corporate executives, federal investigators, and independent parties who brought these issues to light. She adjusted her glasses. Our first witness is Mr. Robert Hale, founder and former CEO of Hale Dynamics. Mr. Hale, please raise your right hand. Robert Hale stood, swore to tell the truth, and sat down with the bearing of a man who'd testified before Congress a dozen times. When Senator Whitaker asked him to provide his opening statement, he spoke with the confidence of someone who believed he was untouchable. Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to address these allegations. Hale Dynamics has served this nation for 40 years, providing cutting-edge technology to our armed forces. We employ 30,000 Americans. We've contributed to every major defense initiative since the Gulf War, and we take the safety and integrity of our products extremely seriously. He paused for effect. The allegations brought against this company are based on stolen documents, selectively edited communications, and the testimony of a disgruntled former employee who committed acts of domestic terrorism. Clinton Zane was fired for insubordination and repeated violations of company policy. Rather than accept responsibility for his actions, he chose to destroy property, endanger lives, and fabricate evidence to justify his vendetta. Senator Whitaker interrupted. Mr. Hale, are you saying the documents provided to this committee were fabricated? I'm saying they were taken out of context. Engineering discussions about acceptable risk parameters are standard in the defense industry. Every system has tolerances. Every design involves trade-offs. To suggest that internal deliberations about those trade-offs constitute negligence is absurd. What about the Nevada incident? 2 soldiers died when a guidance system malfunctioned. Are you saying that was acceptable? That incident was tragic, and we've cooperated fully with the DoD's investigation. But the preliminary findings classified it as operator error, not equipment failure. Preliminary findings that your company helped produce, Senator Whitaker said coolly. We'll return to that point. Thank you, Mr. Hale. Robert sat back, looking satisfied. Finn watched him, counting the micro-expressions, the slight tightening around the eyes, the way his fingers drummed once against the table. The man was confident, but not as confident as he pretended to be. Alexandra was called next. She stood, swore her oath, and sat down with her hands folded on the table. Senator Whitaker's expression softened slightly. Ms. Hale, you recently resigned as CEO of Hale Dynamics and agreed to cooperate with federal investigators. Can you explain why? Alexandra took a breath. Because I realized that my company had prioritized profit over safety, and I couldn't be part of that anymore. The room erupted in whispers. Robert Hale's face went purple. Senator Whitaker raised a hand for silence. Ms. Hale, are you testifying that Hale Dynamics knowingly deployed flawed technology? Yes, Senator, I am. And you have evidence to support this? I do. I provided it to the FBI, and I'm providing it to this committee. Internal communications show that senior engineers, including Clinton Zane, raised concerns about the guidance system's error margins. Those concerns were dismissed by executive leadership, including my father and myself, because addressing them would have delayed production and jeopardized an $800 million contract. Robert Hale leaned forward to his microphone. Madam Chairwoman, my daughter is not a qualified engineer. She's operating under a misunderstanding of... Mr. Hale, you'll have a chance to respond. Please let Ms. Hale finish. Alexandra continued, her voice steady. After the Nevada incident, I reviewed the findings myself. The malfunction was not operator error. It was a cascading failure caused by the exact vulnerability Clinton Zane had warned us about. And instead of taking responsibility, we allowed the DoD to classify it incorrectly because it protected our liability. That's a lie, Robert's voice boomed across the chamber. Madam Chairwoman, I demand... Mr. Hale, you are out of order. One more outburst and you'll be removed from this chamber. Robert sat back, fuming. Alexandra met her father's eyes, and Finn saw something pass between them, anger, betrayal, and a kind of sad finality. Thank you, Ms. Hale, Senator Whitaker said. This committee appreciates your courage in coming forward. After a short recess, Finn was called to the witness table. He walked to the front of the room, acutely aware of every eye on him, and raised his right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. He sat down, adjusted the microphone, and waited. Senator Whitaker smiled faintly. Mr. Carter, you've had quite a month. Yes, ma'am. You're a former Army EOD specialist, correct? Yes, ma'am. 6 years, Iraq and Afghanistan. And you were working as a security guard at Hale Dynamics when the bombing occurred? That's correct. Can you walk us through what happened that morning? Finn took a breath and began. He described the white van, the driver's behavior, the fake badge, the decision to run to the executive floor. He described locking Alexandra in the panic room, the explosions, the interrogation, the storage unit. He spoke clearly, factually, without embellishment. When he finished, Senator Whitaker leaned forward. Mr. Carter, you disarmed a live explosive device without backup, without authorization, and while under house arrest. Why? Because people would have died if I didn't, ma'am. That's not your job. You were a security guard. Why didn't you wait for the bomb squad? Because the bomb squad wouldn't have arrived in time. The device was set to detonate in 38 minutes. Evacuation radius was 300 meters. There was an elementary school inside that radius. He met her eyes. I had the training, I had the tools, and I had 38 minutes, so I used them. A younger senator, a man from Texas with a drawl and a skeptical expression, spoke up. Mr. Carter, isn't it true that you violated the terms of your bail to insert yourself into an active federal investigation? Yes, sir. And isn't it true that you had a personal relationship with Ms. Hale that might have influenced your actions? No, sir. I'd never spoken to Ms. Hale before the day of the bombing. I didn't insert myself into the investigation. The bomber came to my apartment, to my daughter, and I did what I had to do to keep people safe. But you could have called the FBI immediately. You could have secured the suspect and waited for backup. Instead, you had a conversation with a domestic terrorist. Why? Finn's jaw tightened. Because Clinton Zane wasn't just a terrorist, Senator. He was a father who'd lost his daughter because a corporation chose profit over safety. He was an engineer who'd tried to do the right thing and been destroyed for it. And he wanted someone to hear him, so I listened. And because I listened, he surrendered peacefully, and nobody else got hurt. That's a very sympathetic portrayal of a man who planted bombs in a building. It's an accurate portrayal, sir. Sympathy and accuracy aren't mutually exclusive. The senator sat back, looking annoyed. Senator Whitaker suppressed a smile. Mr. Carter, you've provided this committee with extensive documentation regarding Hale Dynamics' internal communications. How did you obtain these documents? Ms. Hale gave them to me, ma'am. Why you? Why not the FBI directly? Finn glanced at Alexandra, who nodded slightly. Because she trusted me to do the right thing, and because she knew that if she gave them to the FBI without an intermediary, her father's legal team would bury them in motions and delays. She needed someone outside the system, someone who didn't have anything to lose. And what did you do with them? I gave them to Agent Reeves, immediately. Senator Whitaker nodded. One final question, Mr. Carter. You've been offered a position in the private security industry,
A lucrative position by all accounts. Are you planning to accept? No, ma'am. Why not? Because I don't want to work for people who prioritize profit over safety. I've seen what that costs, and I'm not interested in being part of it. Then what will you do? Finn hesitated. He thought about Audrey, about Sarah, about the market square and the panic room and the storage unit. He thought about all the patterns he'd seen, all the warnings he'd given, all the times he'd been ignored. I'm going to teach, he said. Threat assessment, pattern recognition, how to see what others miss. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that the people at the bottom, the guards, the technicians, the soldiers, they're the ones who see the cracks first. And if we train them to trust their instincts and speak up, maybe we can stop the next disaster before it happens. Senator Whitaker smiled. I think that's an excellent idea, Mr. Carter. Thank you for your testimony. After the hearing, Finn stood in the hallway outside the chamber, loosening his tie and feeling like he'd just run a marathon. Alexandra approached, her lawyers trailing behind. You did well in there, she said. So did you. Your father looked like he wanted to strangle someone. Probably me. She glanced back toward the chamber. He hasn't spoken to me since I resigned. I don't think he ever will. I'm sorry. Don't be. I made my choice, and I'd make it again. She held out her hand. Thank you, Carter, for everything. He shook it. What will you do now? Start over, I guess. I've been talking to some investors about launching a new firm, one that actually prioritizes safety and transparency. It'll be smaller, less profitable. But maybe that's the point. She smiled. And I've been thinking about your idea. Teaching, training. Maybe there's a place for that kind of work in the industry. Maybe we need people like you to keep people like me honest. Maybe. If you ever want to collaborate, let me know. I think we'd make a good team. I'll keep that in mind, Ms. Hale. She walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor, and Finn watched her go. Then he pulled out his phone and texted Audrey. Done. Coming home. Her response was immediate. Did you call anyone the wrong pronoun? No. Did you accidentally swear? No. Then I'm proud of you. Also, Mrs. Chen made empanadas. Hurry home. Finn smiled and headed for the exit. The fallout from the hearing was swift and comprehensive. Within 2 weeks, the Department of Justice announced criminal charges against 3 senior executives at Hale Dynamics, including Robert Hale, for fraud, obstruction of justice, and manslaughter. The company's stock plummeted. Major contracts were canceled, and the DoD launched a comprehensive review of its procurement processes, with new oversight mechanisms designed to prevent similar failures. Clinton Zane was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for domestic terrorism and destruction of property. But his testimony, combined with the evidence he'd provided, led to sweeping changes in how defense contractors reported safety concerns. Whistleblower protections were strengthened, independent review boards were mandated, and a new federal task force was established to investigate procurement fraud. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't enough. But it was something. 2 months after the hearing, on a cold January morning, Finn stood in front of a classroom at John Jay College of Criminal Justice in Manhattan. 23 students sat in the rows before him, some military veterans, some aspiring federal agents, some just kids who wanted to make a difference. Good morning, Finn said. I'm Finn Carter, and this is Threat Assessment and Pattern Recognition. Over the next 16 weeks, we're going to talk about how to see the things other people miss, how to trust your instincts, and how to speak up when something doesn't feel right, even if everyone else tells you you're wrong. A hand went up in the back row. Is it true you disarmed a bomb while under house arrest? Finn smiled. Let's start with lesson 1. Sometimes the rules are less important than the results. But let's also be clear. I got lucky. I had training, experience, and 38 minutes. Most of you won't have all 3. So the question isn't whether you can be a hero. The question is whether you can be observant, prepared, and brave enough to act when it matters. He clicked to the first slide. Let's talk about anomalies. After class, Finn walked across campus to the coffee shop where he'd agreed to meet Alexandra. She was already there, sitting by the window with 2 cups on the table. You're late, she said. Class ran long. Students had questions. Good questions? Mostly. One kid asked if I'd ever met Jason Bourne. Alexandra laughed. And what did you say?
I told him Jason Bourne doesn't fill out incident reports. She slid one of the coffees toward him. I wanted to update you on something. The Hale Carter Foundation officially launched last week. Finn blinked. The what? The Hale Carter Foundation. My father agreed to fund it as part of his plea deal. $10 million to support veterans' transition programs, engineering scholarships, and safety training initiatives. I'm running it, and I'd like you to be on the advisory board. Alexandra, I don't know anything about running a foundation. You know about seeing problems before they explode. That's what we need. She leaned forward. We're also launching a fellowship program. High school students interested in STEM fields get mentorship, internships, and college scholarships. Audrey's already been nominated as one of the first fellows. Finn stared at her. You nominated my daughter? I didn't nominate her. Her science teacher did. Apparently, she built a functional seismograph out of spare electronics and predicted a minor earthquake 2 days before it happened. The teacher said she's unnervingly brilliant. Alexandra smiled. Wonder where she gets that? Finn shook his head, but he was smiling too. She's going to be impossible to live with after this. Good. The world needs more impossible women. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the students stream past outside the window. Then Alexandra said quietly, Do you ever think about that day? The panic room? Every day. Do you regret it? Any of it? Finn thought about Sarah, about the market square, about all the years he'd spent counting seconds and searching for patterns. He thought about Audrey, about the hearing, about standing in front of a classroom and teaching people to trust their instincts. No, he said. I don't regret it. I just wish I'd figured it out sooner. Figured what out? That sometimes the best way to honor the people you've lost is to keep doing the work they believed in, even when it's hard, even when nobody's watching. He met her eyes. Sarah used to say that the world doesn't change because of grand gestures. It changes because of small, consistent acts of courage. And I think she was right. Alexandra nodded slowly. Your wife sounds like she was an extraordinary person. She was. And I think she'd be proud of what we've built here. I think so too. That evening, Finn picked Audrey up from her robotics club meeting and drove her to a small community center in Queens. Inside, a dozen veterans sat in a circle, talking about their transitions from military to civilian life. It was a support group Finn had started attending 3 months ago, and tonight, for the first time, he'd agreed to speak. Audrey sat in the back row, doing homework on her tablet, while Finn stood at the front of the room. My name is Finn Carter, he said. I was Army EOD for 6 years. I lost my wife in Kabul, and for a long time after that, I didn't know how to be a person anymore. I just knew how to count seconds, frequencies, heartbeats, anything to keep the noise in my head quiet. He paused, looking at the faces in front of him. Some were young, some were old. All of them carried the same weight he did. But here's what I've learned. You don't stop being a soldier just because you take off the uniform. You don't stop seeing threats just because you're not overseas. And you don't stop wanting to protect people just because the war is over. He took a breath. The question is, how do you take all that training, all that hypervigilance, all that need to serve, and turn it into something that doesn't destroy you? How do you find purpose when the mission is over? A woman in the second row raised her hand. Did you figure it out? I'm figuring it out, Finn said, every day. And what I've learned is that the mission isn't over. It's just different. Instead of disarming bombs, I'm teaching people how to recognize threats. Instead of filing reports that get ignored, I'm building systems that make sure people listen. Instead of counting down to disaster, I'm counting up to possibility. He looked at Audrey, who'd stopped doing her homework, and was watching him with Sarah's eyes. And I'm doing it for the people I love, the ones who are here and the ones who aren't, because that's what they would have wanted. That's what they deserved. When the meeting ended, a young man approached Finn. He couldn't have been more than 25, with a prosthetic leg and a Marine Corps tattoo on his forearm. Sir, I just wanted to say thank you. I've been struggling since I got back. Couldn't hold a job, couldn't sleep, couldn't stop feeling like I should be doing something. And what you said about finding a new mission, that makes sense to me. What did you do in the Corps? Finn asked. Combat engineer, cleared routes, diffused IEDs,
built bridges. Then you're exactly the kind of person we need. Are you looking for work? The young man blinked. Are you offering? I'm teaching a course at John Jay. We could use a TA, someone with field experience.
It doesn't pay much, but it's a start. And if you're interested in going back to school, I can help you navigate the GI Bill. The young man's eyes welled up. Seriously? Seriously, give me your contact info. We'll set something up. As Finn and Audrey walked to the car, she bumped his shoulder with hers. You're collecting strays now? I'm building a team. Same thing. She climbed into the passenger seat. You're a good person, Dad. Mom would be really proud of you. Finn started the engine, and for the first time in years, when he thought about Sarah, he didn't feel the weight of guilt. He felt the lightness of gratitude. I hope so, kiddo, he said. I really hope so. 6 months later, on a warm June evening, Finn stood on the rooftop of a newly renovated building in Brooklyn. The structure had once been a warehouse, but now it housed the headquarters of the Hale Carter Foundation, complete with classrooms, workshop spaces, and a state-of-the-art lab for student fellows. Alexandra stood beside him, holding a champagne flute and looking out over the city. We did it, she said. You did it. I just showed up. You did more than show up, Carter. You changed everything. She gestured to the building below. This place exists because you refused to look away, because you saw something wrong and decided to fix it, even when it cost you everything. It didn't cost me everything. I still have Audrey. I still have work that matters. That's more than enough. Is it? Alexandra turned to face him. What about you, Carter? What do you want? Not for Audrey, not for your students. For you. Finn thought about it. He thought about Sarah, about the life they'd planned before the war, about all the dreams that had died in that market square. And then he thought about the life he'd built since, the students he'd taught, the veterans he'd helped, the foundation they'd created together. I want to keep doing this, he said. I want to keep teaching people to see patterns, to trust their instincts, to speak up when something's wrong. I want to keep building a world where people like Clinton Zane don't feel like violence is their only option. And I want to make sure that when people do speak up, someone actually listens. Alexandra smiled. Then let's keep building. They clinked glasses as the sun set over Brooklyn, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Below them, the city hummed with life, millions of people moving through their lives, unaware of the patterns that connected them, the systems that protected them, the quiet guardians who watched over them. And on the rooftop, Finn Carter stood with his daughter beside him, counting not seconds or frequencies or threats, but blessings. 1. The students who'd found their purpose. 2. The veterans who'd found their way home. 3. The foundation that would outlive them all. 4. The knowledge that Sarah's legacy wasn't in the market square, but in every life they touched, every person they helped, every small act of courage they inspired. Audrey appeared at his elbow, holding a bright red kite she'd built herself, a complex design with sensors and stabilizers and a camera mounted on the tail. Ready to test it? She asked. Always. Together they walked to the edge of the roof. Finn held the string while Audrey adjusted the tension, checking the wind speed and direction with the same focus he'd once used to defuse bombs. When everything was perfect, she nodded, and they launched the kite into the evening air. It rose higher and higher, held aloft by timing, trust, and invisible balance. The camera on its tail streamed footage to Audrey's tablet, a bird's-eye view of the city sprawling below, beautiful and chaotic, and full of possibility. Look at that, Audrey whispered. You can see everything from up here. That's the idea, kiddo. The higher you climb, the more you can see. And the more you can see, the more you can protect. Alexandra joined them, watching the kite dance against the darkening sky. Your daughter's going to change the world, Carter. I know. And so are you. Finn didn't respond. He just stood there, holding the string, counting the gentle pull of the wind against his hands. 1, 2, 3. And for the first time since the war, the silence in his mind wasn't grief or guilt or the endless ticking of a clock counting down to disaster. It was peace. And it was enough. Far below, in a federal prison in Pennsylvania, Clinton Zane sat in his cell and read a letter that had arrived that morning. It was from Finn Carter, and it contained a single photograph, the dedication plaque at the Hale Carter Foundation building. Engraved in the metal were the names of people who'd died because safety warnings had been ignored. Sarah Carter was on the list. So was Emma Zane. At the bottom of the letter, Finn had written, "Your daughter's name will be remembered, not for how she died, but for how she lived and for the changes her story inspired. That's not justice, but it's something, and sometimes something is enough." Zane folded the letter carefully, tucked it under his pillow, and closed his eyes. For the first time in years, he slept without nightmares. And in Queens, in a small third-floor apartment that smelled like coffee and old books, Finn Carter sat at his desk and wrote lesson plans for the fall semester. Outside, the city hummed with its usual chaos: sirens, laughter, music, arguments, life in all its messy glory. He counted the sounds, 1, 2, 3, not because he needed to anymore, but because it reminded him that he was alive, that Sarah was gone, but her legacy lived on, that patterns could be seen, threats could be prevented, and sometimes, if you were brave enough and stubborn enough and paid enough attention, you could actually change things. He opened his laptop and typed a message to his students. Lesson 1, pay attention. Lesson 2, trust your instincts. Lesson 3, speak up. The world doesn't need more heroes. It needs more people who are willing to see what's wrong and do something about it. Be one of those people. He hit send, closed the laptop, and walked to Audrey's room. She was asleep, her robot arm dangling off the edge of the bed, her science fair trophy catching the streetlight from the window. Finn kissed her forehead gently. Sweet dreams, kiddo. Tomorrow we'll build something new. And as he closed the door and walked back to his own room, he looked at Sarah's photo on the nightstand. Her bright eyes, her wind-blown hair, her smile that had once been his whole world. "I'm still trying," he whispered. "Every day I'm still trying." And somewhere in the space between memory and hope, he felt her answer. Not in words, but in the quiet certainty that he was exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was meant to do. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of possibility. And that, Finn Carter thought, was more than enough.